The Percy Jackson book series was one of the biggest pop culture phenomenons in the 2000s. Everybody and their grandma knew about these books. They were so popular that they were often assigned reading in various schools across America, mine included. Almost every kid that read these books loved it and in turn became a massive fan of Greek mythology, and I was also one of those kids. When I was a kid, it was very difficult to get me to read. I did not like reading. All I wanted to do was collect my Pokemon cards and play Super Monkey Ball 2 on the GameCube. Then one day, while I was rewinding my VHS copy of The Making of Jurassic Park, I saw a partial cover of a book sticking out of my older brother's backpack. It was a copy of Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth. The beautiful cover artwork done by John Rocco immediately drew me in, and I instantly grabbed it and just started reading it. I, of course, was reading it wrong and was very confused as, yes, it was the fourth book. Then my older brother came in, snatched it out of my hand, slapped Lightning Thief in its place, and the rest was history. Don't blame me, I was a kid, and the book wasn't numbered, okay. So I read The Lightning Thief, and like most children, I loved it. I was such a big fan that I just went on to read every single other book in the series after it. Everything about it, the world, the sprawling adventure, all the main characters, it was the perfect kids' adventure book. It's what made me interested in Greek mythology and mythologies as a whole. And with all things that are massively popular and massively successful, it gets an adaptation. The film was to be directed by Chris Columbus, an excellent choice, I would say, at that time. He was mostly known for directing the first two Harry Potter films in the massively popular Harry Potter franchise. And some people would often say that Percy Jackson was kind of a successor to Harry Potter in a lot of ways. So to have the director of those two first films come in and say, I'll take care of this, felt great. What an excellent choice for a director to start off this brand new franchise than the man that started the Harry Potter franchise. Perfect. Or so we thought. I'm gonna do something a little different with this review. Whenever a book series gets a movie or series adaptation, I try to separate my feelings and thoughts for that book series as to what it ended up being in the adaptation, because at the end of the day, they're two entirely separate entities. There will never be a perfect book to movie adaptation. Hold on. Because they're inherently different art forms. As perfect as the Lord of the Rings movies are, they are not truly perfect. They're still an adaptation. There's no way they are just the book perfected into a movie. There's changes, there's different things. The way you picture characters in the book is different than who they got. So it will never truly be perfect. I do love those movies, by the way. So don't get me wrong, I love Lord of the Rings. But you get my point. There is never going to be a perfect adaptation because it's inherently impossible. But I am very familiar with the Percy Jackson books, and I think it might be kind of fun to put the book was better saying to the test in this review. Also, a lot of the major issues that can be found in this movie could have easily been solved if they had just been a little more faithful to the adaptation and followed exactly what happened in the book. Some of the changes were so egregious that even the book's author, Rick Riordan, he wrote them an entirely new script free of charge. The filmmakers and producers ignored this, of course, as they would, and they continued with the production anyway. And then we got this. So join me as we discuss Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Before this video begins, I'm actually going to need you to leave a like, subscribe, share this video around, because all of my subscribers become members of the very cool Downtown Ghoulsville. It's very cool and very ghoul. Even with all the things that frustrate me in this movie, I will not fail to bring attention to things that are actually good, like the opening shot. This is really cool. The title being Lightning Thief, and to immediately see the effects of that in the world itself is kind of awesome. Although this doesn't make practical sense because the lightning bolt that was stolen from Zeus does not mean there's no longer lightning storms, but hey, it's pretty damn cool looking. Poseidon and Sean Bean, also known as Zeus, have a little meetup on top of the Empire State Building. Hey, my lightning bolt went missing and I think your son took it. Nuh-uh. Yeah-huh. And if he doesn't return it by the solstice, then we're gonna have a big war.
Or there will be war.
After the prologue, we meet our lead, and I'm sure all of you who are at least vaguely familiar with the book series have noticed something is seriously wrong with the main character. Percy Jackson looks old.
Why are you f***ing here, man? You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
At least older than 12. Logan Lerman was 17 years old while filming The Lightning Thief, which is significantly older than the 12-year-old version of the character in the book. Christopher Columbus thought it would be a good idea to age up the main characters of the series to better separate itself from the Harry Potter series, and because he saw it as silly that such a young kid would be battling with a sword. Which is kind of the entire point of that aspect of the book. It's a kid's power fantasy in the same way that going to Hogwarts to become a young wizard is. All the main characters have been aged up to better separate itself from the Harry Potter movies.
Well, for me, it was a matter of having obviously lived through the first 3 Harry Potter films. It was extremely important that we avoided any cinematic comparisons whatsoever. There were some comparisons that I felt that had to be removed from the movie itself, so the movie stands on its own. Well, there's been some talk about the age difference. In the book, they're 11 years old, and initially I couldn't conceive of doing some of these sequences where they basically have to train to become warriors with 11-year-olds and wooden swords. I thought, it's just going to be a little cheesy.
But do you know what it doesn't separate itself from? Oh, the half dozen other popular young adult series that focus on teenagers. It's deeply upsetting that this movie is so wrong on multiple levels, and the man that made it created one of the most faithful and accurate book-to-movie adaptations. The plot really begins when Percy and Grover take a trip to a museum with a bunch of Greek statues and such. This is where we meet the character of Mr. Brunner, also known as Chiron, who is played by Pierce Brosnan. An excellent choice, might I say. He's suave, he's cool, and he's old. Percy's teacher pulls him into a side room and then turns into a fleshy bird lady. She starts accusing him of being the lightning thief. This is when Chiron and Grover burst in.
Release him or I swear I'll tear you to pieces!
Miss Dodd fucks off, and Grover and Chiron spill the beans, but they don't actually explain anything to Percy. At this point in the book, Chiron gives Percy a sword to kill the Furies, and he does so. Then Chiron leaves, and the entire school gaslights him into thinking there was never a Miss Dodds. The rest of the school not remembering her is due to the mist. It's essentially the same reason Muggles in the Harry Potter universe can't see magical stuff. Chiron and Grover are actually just gaslighting him for weeks. It's hilarious.
It's a powerful weapon. Only use it in times of severe distress.
This is a pen.
Chiron, just tell him it's a sword, so he doesn't accidentally kill himself when he clicks the pen. If the pen clicks while in his pocket, he might be fucked. He's at least gonna need a new pair of jeans. Percy and Grover head back to the house to pick up Percy's mom, Sally. They beat up Gabe. And head to Camp Half-Blood.
Your father was unlike any guy I'd ever seen. He was just dazzling. And then you came along, and then it was just perfect.
One of the frustrating things about this adaptation is how much they glorify the gods. Almost every character, excluding the villains, talks about how incredible they are. Poseidon and basically all the gods are deadbeats that give people children and bounce. They are incredibly flawed, and this aspect of the gods in the book series is often criticized by the antagonists. Before they make it to Camp Half-Blood, they have an encounter with the Minotaur. I will say, for all the grief I give this movie, and all the grief I have yet to mention, the creatures look alright. The designs aren't super interesting or anything, but they still visually mesh with the movie's world in a nice way.
We're here!
Wow, I really did not realize how bad the musical score is. It's very generic. They get to the Camp Half-Blood entrance, and Percy's mom can't go through because she's a regular person. Then the Minotaur squishes her, and she turns into some yellow mist. Percy then kills the Minotaur in a pretty bland fight scene, and then passes out. Percy then wakes up in an infirmary, with Grover there to meet him. At first, he thinks it's all a dream, and then when he actually realizes what happened, we get some acting. Now, Logan, you've just woken up from what you think is a dream, and realize that your mom is actually dead. You are absolutely broken over the loss of your mother, okay? So let's see that pain portrait, got it? Okay? Ready? Action.
No. All of it was real? My mom's gone?
Perfect!
Ooh, the daughters of Aphrodite. Their mother's the goddess of love, so you know where that leads.
This is just one of those things that feels kind of icky, They made this version of Grover a sex pest, and it makes it even ickier that these daughters of Aphrodite are canonically underage, and Grover, well, he isn't. He's still so small for his age. How old is he? Oh, 28. What? And he's in 6th grade? Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. So, this is Camp Half-Blood, the most famous location from the franchise. Think of it like this series is Hogwarts. Yes, I'm going to be making a lot of Harry Potter comparisons because, of course. The notable locations of Camp Half-Blood in this are an infirmary, and immediately outside the infirmary is an archery range, which seems like an obviously terrible idea that almost immediately results in a death.
Whoa! Guys, watch the arrows!
There are also some generic cabins, the lake, and Percy's cabin, which is Poseidon themed. There's also a main gate entrance and some forest where they probably filmed the X-Men movies. Anyone that has been to a summer camp of some kind, which Camp Half-Blood is meant to be, it's meant to be a summer camp, knows that there are locations that immediately stand out in your mind. I was lucky enough to go to a summer camp for a week while in high school, and I vividly remember some of these locations. We had a dining hall, various teepees and wagons that served as cabins. We also had actual cabins. There was a small lake where we would often canoe around and attempt to not flip over the canoe. Those things were very unstable, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been in a canoe. Very unstable.
It's too deep here.
Okay.
There was a paintball arena, a church, and a rock wall. And of course, we had a blob, because what good summer camp didn't? This camp we see here is nothing like a summer camp. It honestly feels more like a miserable military boot camp. I know it's demigods and Greek mythology themed, but it's not supposed to be miserable. It's a summer camp. It's supposed to be fun. It also feels like an incredibly cramped location. Grover and Percy walk this path a few times, and it never really feels any bigger than this. Comparing it to the book, this is very disappointing. Camp Half-Blood in the book is awesome. Everyone who read this wanted to go here. It had all the aspects of an actual summer camp with a Greek mythology flair to it. It has actual themed cabins, each representing different Greek gods. There was your standard mess hall and a volleyball court, but they also had an amphitheater for chariot races and a rock wall. It was a fun and dynamic location that had a summer feel and vibe to it that could so easily translate into the big screen that failed miserably with this iteration. So Percy then meets up with Mr. Brunner, who is actually a horseman named Chiron, and then that leads us into the capture the flag scene. Whew, this entire scene is a mess. A mess of poor stunt choreography, confusing gameplay that doesn't make any sense, and supposed campers with very intense 5 o'clock shadows. It's a basic game of capture the flag. We all know how capture the flag works. I'll give you a brief rundown if you don't. Each team has a flag, and the other team has to grab the enemy team's flag and bring it back to where their own flag is located. That's the gist of it. You know, people add their rules to it, but that's basically how it works. It's in every single multiplayer first-person shooter. And that's how it usually works. Well, not in this. Apparently, if you literally lift the other team's flag out of the ground, you win, I guess. This isn't how it worked in the book either. It was your standard capture the flag game, but they used real weaponry. How do they use real weaponry and not have children dying constantly? Good question. Nectar and ambrosia. Nectar and ambrosia are used to heal demigods, and both taste like whatever food brought you the best memories in your life. For Percy, it tastes like his mom's chocolate chip cookies that she would make him. So if you get sliced up in Capture the Flag or various other camp activities, you're healed. Nectar or ambrosia aren't brought up once in this entire movie, so I guess they just don't care if they kill a kid. Or a 40-year-old, I guess.
Why are you fucking here, man? You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
Percy gets into a duel right before grabbing the flag. I guess grabbing it doesn't count, but lifting it out of the ground does. Okay, whatever. So he fights Annabeth, and I'll just say that this version of the character is so weird. Obviously, the main issue is, the big one, it's that she's not a child. And they seemingly combined the bully character from the books, Clarice LaRue, and Annabeth to make this very intense and mean version of the character. Then they basically drop the antagonistic traits as soon as the characters decide to leave the camp later on.
Finding Annabeth was a bit of a challenge because we interviewed a lot of so-called ingenues in Hollywood, and no one there eats anything, so they all weigh about 40 pounds. And I thought, how in God's name am I going to create a warrior who can fight, who looks like she hasn't had a cheeseburger in 10 years? So when Alex came into the picture, I thought, well, here's someone who's a formidable warrior, who appears to be a demigod, and that's why I cast Alex.
What a forward young man you are!
It's really unfortunate how badly they fumbled not only Annabeth, but the other main characters as well. The small character traits and personalities and interests that these kids had in the book are vacant, instead replaced by these hollow older versions of the characters. Book Annabeth has a love of architecture. Throughout the story, the trio will take a detour because Annabeth wants to go see the Seattle Arch. It's something that she aspires to be in the future. Similarly hollow is Grover. Instead of being his meek self from the books, now he's a player. He's just horny. Book Grover has a passion to overcome his cowardice nature and become a proper satyr to one day gain the ability to search for the lost god Pan. All of these characters have lost what made them these characters in the first place. During this duel, Percy gets beaten. It's looking pretty rough for our hero, and all the other campers from both teams just decided to stand around and watch it as if they're not participating in a competition. So Percy is hurt, and then he hears this really corny dialogue from a mysterious voice.
Go to the water.
And that heals him up and powers him up. The red team tries to attack him, and then he beats up like 4 of them, and then everyone backs off like, whoa. And then he pulls the flag out of the ground, and everyone cheers, and the red team goes, God, man. This whole scene is so goofy, and it doesn't make sense. An aspect from the book that was not implemented into the movie is being claimed, with this capture the flag scene in the book being how we find out who Percy's dad is. Spoiler, it's Poseidon. It's the water one. This is when a godly parent claims a half-blood as their own kin, and then a little Sims diamond appears over their head with like a cool logo. A lot of the kids in Camp Half-Blood are undetermined and get thrown into the Hermes cabin. This whole unclaimed, undetermined aspect of the story is incredibly important in the grand scheme of the original series, as well as one of the main villain's main motivations. So now everyone thinks Percy is epic and they all respect him now. Even Annabeth respects him, and we get to see some of their non-existent chemistry.
I definitely have strong feelings for you. I just haven't decided if they're positive or negative yet.
You let me know. You figure it out.
Then the devil, I mean Hades shows up and tells Percy to bring him the stolen lightning bolt, and he can have his mom back, because, plot twist, his mom is alive. So that night, Percy preps to leave the camp to get his mom. Then Grover and Annabeth tag along on the adventure. But before they leave, they meet up with Luke Castellan, the cool bad boy of camp, who plays Modern Warfare 2. Even though, in the book, mortal equipment and electronics aren't really allowed in Camp Half-Blood because, you know, it attracts monsters. But don't worry about that.
Figured you'd stop by sooner or later. Everybody does. Get away from all that Renaissance fair stuff out there, you know?
Luke gives them some gear, and then opens a magical map that introduces this Pearl plotline. So in this movie, they need to locate pearls across the US, and these pearls will give them safe travel out of the underworld once they're there. This is a near non-existent aspect in the book. The characters don't seek out Persephone's pearls. Persephone's not in it, and she doesn't have pearls to seek. Percy is gifted the pearls from his father, so he doesn't become trapped in the underworld when he inevitably goes there. The locations and monsters the characters encounter on their journey to the underworld happen due to them being half-bloods and naturally attracting monsters. It's also a very common storytelling device used in ancient Greek stories of heroism. Heroes would often stumble upon these beasts and stories in an almost destined way. The characters just deciding to go on a quest may give them some more agency in the story, but it does remove a big element to the overarching narrative of the entire book series. To go on a quest and leave Camp Half-Blood, a camper must receive a prophecy from the spirit of Delphi. It's just a mummy in hippie attire in like an old attic. Don't worry about it. It's not that important. These prophecies and quests tie deeply into Greek mythology and follow the narrative of ancient Greek storytelling. And in this, it's absent. It's very frustrating how much they gloss over in this movie. Percy doesn't even begin the quest to retrieve the lightning bolt until nearly halfway through the book. He leaves Camp Half-Blood in chapter 9, and The Lightning Thief is only 22 chapters. That's a lot of setup and world building that the book needed to do to establish the rules of the universe and how characters can function in it. The first Harry Potter movie also spent a lot of time establishing its world and rules before the main storyline could even properly start. The group arrives at the first location, that being Auntie M's Garden Emporium. They dick around for a bit before realizing that this place is Medusa's lair.
He's just like my Uncle Ferdinand. It's not my Uncle Ferdinand, because my Uncle Ferdinand was killed by Medusa.
How did anyone know that Grover's uncle was killed by Medusa? Someone would have to come here to find that out, right? And I doubt Medusa is bragging online about stoning various people. This just doesn't make sense. They run around for a bit, and then Percy uses his handy-dandy iPod, yes, you can tell when this movie was made, to help slay Medusa.
Heads up.
They grab the pearl and bounce. After leaving Medusa's lair and heading to the location of the next pearl, they nearly crash while driving down a highway. I really struggle to see the treachery of this adventure. Each individual location they visit has some Greek mythology attached to it, but other than that, nothing. I want you to imagine these characters being pursued across the United States on their way to the Underworld by any monsters in the vicinity. They can't use a car to get across the country, and knowing how poorly built for public transportation the US is, you can imagine how straining this journey would be. Okay, now take all that, and these characters are 12. They arrive at the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. They locate the pearl, but have to wait overnight due to all the tourists. After nightfall, Annabeth murders some janitors, and they're all in the clear. Percy straps on the flying Converse high tops and takes off. This gives me brain strain because Percy should not be able to leave the ground. Grover uses these flying shoes in the book due to Zeus being so angry with Poseidon, and in turn his son Percy, that if he leaves the ground, entering Zeus's domain, he might be smited down from the sky. I picked up the flying shoes and had a sudden bad feeling. I looked at Chiron. I won't be able to use these, will I? He shook his head. Luke meant well, Percy. But taking to the air, that would not be wise for you. So this should not be allowed or even possible for Percy. He gets the pearl and all the janitors fuse into a Hydra to kill Annabeth for murdering them. A big CG monster fight begins and it's okay. You know, the VFX in this movie doesn't look too bad, but there are certainly some effects in this movie that look a little off. But anyway, they just pull out the Medusa head and they kill it. Sorry, I'm done talking about this sequence, because guess what? None of this happens in the book. I think it's okay to add elements to an adaptation when the addition adds to the overall picture, but in this case, it's just a waste of time. There were so many chapters cut for this adaptation that it's immensely obnoxious that they crammed in their own fanfic. If they really wanted to use a Hydra, you could have just waited to make the second movie. That's all I'm saying. The location of the last pearl is located in Las Vegas at the Lotus Casino. They show up and are immediately given magic-infused flower cookie things. Not really sure what these are. They just look like wax to me. When eaten, these cookies make the trio want to stay here forever. You'd think after all the weird things that had previously happened to these people, they wouldn't be accepting random food in a location of a pearl, from which we know each location so far has had some awful creature guarding it. Why would your guard not be up? Especially considering how pushy these waitresses are being.
Try a lotus flower. They're so good. It's our signature dish.
Oh, really signature.
Here's your complimentary Lotus Fun Book.
Well, thanks, but we're not staying.
You know, this kind of mistake would be a lot easier to understand if they were actually children. They had to create these flowers as a device to dumb down the characters so that they stay, when the location itself is what is seducing you to stay. It keeps you in a trance because of the paradise it offers. It's a cool place that the characters are comfortable in. They are starving out in the US, trying to get to the Underworld, and they find this haven, this oasis, and it's free. No wonder people are lured into that. No, they have to give them these stupid cookies. The characters party for a bit, they eat a bunch of flowers, we get a cringy CG dance sequence with the sex pest Grover, and then we hear this.
No, Percy. Don't eat the flower.
So this casino is of course another cursed Greek place with this being one that makes you want to stay forever. Percy locates the pearl, and then it turns into a big, dumb chase sequence. They then steal one of the show cars and bounce.
Oh, keys! Oh, got the keys! Come on! Drive!
Okay, they're coming!
Did they really just put the keys there? That seems like a bad idea. Oh no! Turns out they were at the casino for longer than they thought, and now the solstice is tomorrow. Uh-oh. They find the Underworld entrance underneath the Hollywood sign, and we get introduced to this incredibly boring room cave thing. It's as cliche and as uninteresting of a design as you could imagine for the Underworld. In the book, it has a unique look and feel to it. We walked inside the DOA lobby. Music played softly on hidden speakers. The carpet and the walls were steel gray. Pencil cactuses grew in the corners like skeleton hands. The furniture was black leather, and every seat was taken. There were people sitting on couches, people standing up, people staring out the window or waiting for the elevator. Nobody moved, or talked, or did much of anything. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see them all just fine. But if I focused on any one of them in particular, they started looking transparent. I could see right through their bodies. It has a fun Percy Jackson spin on it that makes it into something much more interesting than this. And nothing better can be said about the rest of the Underworld. It's looking very much like a Christianity Underworld to me. They arrive at Hades' house and are greeted by Persephone and some dogs. Hey, what are you doing here? She's not supposed to be here. It's summer, she's here in winter. Hades arrives and he looks like an old school punk rocker. You know, I would commend this for being something that would be straight out of the Percy Jackson book series, but alas, this is the one god they shouldn't have done this with. Hades is described in the book as the only god they meet that actually presents themselves like a god. The room inside looked just like in my dream, except this time the throne of Hades was occupied. He was the third god I'd met, but the first two really struck me as godlike. He was at least 10 feet tall for one thing, and dressed in black silk robes and a crown of braided gold. His skin was albino white, his hair shoulder length and jet black. He wasn't bulked up like Ares, but he radiated power. He lounged on his throne of fused human bones, looking lithe, graceful, and dangerous as a panther. Percy is here for his mom, and she's in this basket that Hades breaks.
Now give me the bolt, or say goodbye to your mother!
What the fuck, Richard?
Then Hades demands Percy give him the bolt, which Percy obviously doesn't have. Or does he? The shield that Luke gave him had the Master Bolt hidden in it from the very beginning, and Annabeth immediately figures this out.
Luke rigged it. He put the bolt in his shield and used us.
Then Persephone claps Hades with the bolt.
Go and give it back.
Back is broken.
Frees everyone, but uh-oh, they only have enough pearls for the three of them to escape. Grover stays because he's the protector, and there's a bunch of weird sexual tension between Persephone and Grover.
I haven't had a satyr visit before.
Which is very weird and very icky when you remember that this character is supposed to look like a little boy. Ahaha, so many sex jokes in this adaptation of a children's book. Percy, Annabeth, and Sally teleport to the Empire State Building to return the bolt, but they are thwarted by Luke, the traitorous swine.
I'm the lightning thief.
Luke explains that the gods have been in control for too long and that we deserve to be on top. This is strange. They sort of changed his villainous motivation and reverted it into something so mundane. Book Luke is a cool guy that you'd love to have as an older brother or cousin. Percy adores him. That's why the revelation of his betrayal is so devastating to the characters. Whereas this version comes off as pretty sleazy and untrustworthy. Plus, he's not in the movie very long, so you don't really get to build that trust with the character. Book Luke betrays everyone because he feels he's been abandoned by the gods, and specifically his father Hermes. Luke has resentment towards the way they've been ignoring their own children and essentially being deadbeats. Most of the children found in the Hermes cabin are not even Hermes' children, but unclaimed demigods. Gods do not have to claim their children at all, and they usually don't. In the book, Poseidon only claimed Percy to signify that Percy was his, and he did this as a signal to get Percy to help him. We never hear any of these defining character traits surrounding Luke or the gods at all. Gods aren't treated like deadbeats. We don't hear any of Luke's actual motivation. It's just completely skipped over for no reason. This is editing Gulif here. That's not entirely true. There is this one quote earlier in camp.
That's because all gods are the same. Selfish. They only care about themselves.
And then a slight elaboration on this during the final fight, but there's not enough detail visible to the main character or the other cast of characters. They still glorify the gods in a way. Percy has a slight annoyance with Poseidon, but that's about it. Annabeth still thinks her mom is alright. We don't really hear about the other kids. None of the other kids talk about their parents. That's it. We hear Luke complain, Percy has doubts about his dad, and Annabeth is pretty ambivalent towards her mother. Whereas in the book, we get multiple points of views of different characters discussing how they feel about their heritage. And we also got this scene that really pisses me off.
Is it like this for everybody? Don't any gods see their kids?
It's forbidden. Right after we were born, Zeus decreed that the gods couldn't have physical contact with their mortal offspring.
They just gave the gods an out. They're not forbidden from speaking to their children. That's such a dumb rule.
Oh, that's a stupid law.
It is a dumb rule because it doesn't make sense. The only thing the gods are forbidden from doing in the series is the big three, Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus, are forbidden from having demigod children because their children are so powerful. And then that's broken, obviously, because the main character is the son of Poseidon. But the gods are allowed to communicate with their kids. They just don't because they're assholes. That's all. I just want to elaborate on that a little bit. Percy and Luke have a scuffle around the Empire State Building. There's some flying, some slashing. Percy flies directly through concrete somehow. Bro, how are you alive? Then he waterboards Luke. Percy meets up with his mom and Annabeth, and they go up and meet with the gods mid-argument. Yes, I know, they all look really stupid. The gods in the book dress like they're from the modern day. Zeus wears a pinstripe suit, Poseidon wears a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts. All the gods have a distinct modern-day style that they wear throughout the series. Percy gives Zeus the Master Bolt, and hooray, the plot's over.
Percy, this is where you belong.
He was here for a literal day. In the book, at least, Percy stayed for nearly a week, and he began to care for all the various characters. Percy has a non-chemistry flirt with Annabeth, and the movie is over. This movie divulges drastically from the book throughout the entire thing, but most of the differences are just in the final third. The trio gets to the Underworld and confronts Hades, but once they get out, they're confronted by Ares. Ares had given them a blue backpack earlier in the book when he met up with them. He asked them to do a small side quest, and in return, he gave them a blue backpack full of magic items, and the Master Bolt was magically hidden in this backpack. After they got out of the Underworld unscathed, Ares confronts and attempts to kill Percy. This results in one of the most cinematic fights in the book. Rick Riordan was gutted that this was one of the sequences they cut because he specifically wrote it to be a cinematic battle. Percy conquers Ares with a little help from the ocean, and the characters head to the Empire State Building. There is no sky battle with Luke on the roof. Luke never shows up here at all. He returns the bolt to Zeus, and he has a small chat with Poseidon, and then they head back to Camp Half-Blood. Only then does Luke reveal his true colors. Whilst having a conversation about the gods with Percy, Luke then drops a venomous scorpion on Percy as an attempt to kill him. He then tells Percy why he did what he did and leaves. It's a devastating betrayal, not only for the audience but to all the main characters who loved Luke dearly. It's also a much more interesting direction for the overarching villain of the series. The movie never dives into what Luke's motivations are. All we get is,
they've been in power for too long. I say it's time for our generation to take over. Remold the world in our image.
Once the characters are initially confronted by Ares, they get some answers as to who is behind the goings-ons. Even when they get most of the answers, there's still some unanswered questions. For example, how did Ares steal the lightning bolt? He could not have taken it because the gods are forbidden from stealing from one another. They can't, they literally can't. So he had to have someone steal it for him. By the time the characters defeat Ares and save the world, we kind of forget about those unanswered questions. You're pulled into a false sense of closure, and that's when old Ricky Riordan strikes. He drops this whole huge twist reveal about Luke, which leaves us reeling. When Luke leaves, it doesn't wrap anything up. It sets up more stakes, because now we know Luke is working at some sort of goal to dismantle the gods. And he's gone now, somewhere out there, setting up the future of the series. And in the movie we get, I'm the bad guy.
I'm the lightning thief.
What do we think happened to Luke after the movie? I fucking died.
I think I am the son of Poseidon.
So that was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. And to be completely honest, it's not a terrible movie. It's a perfectly mediocre young adult fantasy movie. And if you're not really a fan of these books, most of the issues present in this film won't really bother you. If you are a fan, yeah, you'll be pulling out your hairs the entire runtime. I didn't go into everything about this movie that's inaccurate to the book, because that's not really what I was entirely going for. I was going for that a little bit, but not in the minuscule details. When you get down to the nitty and gritty of this movie, the minuscule changes don't really affect all that much. It's when you get into the big picture ideas, that's when we get into a lot of the major issues with this movie overall. There are plenty of videos about book inaccuracies that are way more in depth than this was, and you can find those all over YouTube. But that's not really what I was going for. I wanted to make this video kind of my own thing. It's still mind-blowing to me that the guy that started the Harry Potter movies fumbled this so bad. However, there is still hope. I made this video for a very particular reason. December 20th of this year, we are getting a new adaptation of the Percy Jackson book series, starting with season 1 as the Lightning Thief. This show is being spearheaded by various creatives, and Rick Riordan gets final say on everything. We actually have children playing characters. It's all very book accurate and it's fun, and they're taking ideas from the books that weren't elaborated on and kind of expanding them into their own thing. It's everything you'd want from an adaptation, and that's what we're getting next month. As of recording this video, it's next month. Hopefully this video is out before the show is out, because that was the plan. This new show gives me a lot of hope for myself as a fan and every other fan, and from everything I've seen about fan outreach for this show, it's huge. People are so excited, so ready for a good adaptation of this book series that we all love so much from our childhoods. And that was the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, leave a like if you feel so inclined. Subscribe, share this video around with your grandmother. I'm sure she'll love it. Thank you to everybody. This will be my last video of 2023. Again, if I get it out this time. I just want to thank you all so much. And here's fingers crossed to growing the channel in 2024 and to just having an all-around great year next year. So thank you all for watching. Bye.